Hello, welcome to this video about the English language paper 2. This is the first of 5 videos in which I'm going to go through each of the questions in the paper and hopefully help you understand it. My name is Miss Kilburn Bond and I work for the Athelstan Trust with all of the English departments. So what you can see on the screen at the moment is what an exam paper will look like, part of that front page of the question paper. The Christmas tree is just there to give you a little clue about the text that we're going to be using. So paper 2 is called Writers' Viewpoints and Perspectives, and that title's important. We'll talk about that a little later. It's a 1 hour 45-minute paper, and the exam board give you information and advice at the start that you do need to be aware of, and it will always say the same sorts of things. The marks for the questions are shown in brackets. The maximum mark is 80 and it's equally weighted in that for section A and B there are 40 marks each, so it's so important that you plan your timing to make sure that you give the right amount of effort to each section. You do need to have good English and clear presentation, so obviously your answers can be read so they can be marked fairly, but also especially in section B where spelling and punctuation and grammar and vocabulary are all going to be counted as part of your mark. Section A is predominantly looking at your reading skills and section B your writing skills, and this is the non-fiction paper, so all of that reading and writing is going to be around non-fiction. That means texts that are based on facts, on real life experiences. The advice from the exam board is to spend 15 minutes reading through all the sources and the 5 questions. So at the beginning of the exam, you don't be intimidated if someone else picks up their pen or a highlighter quite quickly. Actually, the advice is just to spend the start of the exam just reading and thinking through what the exam paper looks like, what it includes. You're advised to plan your answer to question 5 before you start writing, and I'll talk about that in the 5th video. And you should make sure that for all of the paper you have got a little bit of time to check through your answers, because it's very easy and common to make little mistakes that you could just tweak quite quickly by reading back through, and obviously that's going to help your mark. So the learning objectives of this video and all 5 videos is to understand the overall format of the GCSE English Language Paper 2, so what to expect, the timings, that kind of thing, but also to revise the priorities for each question so that you've got a strategy that you can then use each time you have to answer. So as I said, the title of the paper is important, Viewpoints and Perspectives. There's a reason why the examiners decide to give the paper this title, and that's because everything in this paper is all about your ability to read and find out a writer's viewpoint and perspective, and then is about you as a writer and your ability to put across your viewpoint and your perspective. So the word viewpoint I think is more easy to understand. Perspective, dictionary definition there for you on the screen, a particular attitude towards or a way of regarding something, a point of view. So all of us, we all have very individual experiences and viewpoints, and people, as you will know, will have very different opinions on different topics depending on the life they've lived and the things that they've seen and the way that they think about anything. So this cartoon picture of the elephant I find quite helpful in explaining what perspectives means and how that works. So you can see all the people standing around that elephant, they've all got their eyes tightly closed and they're all touching a particular part of that elephant. None of them can see it's an elephant. So we've got this man on the left touching the tusk, thinking it's a spear. We've got the lady on the right holding the elephant's tail. She thinks it's a rope. Then we've got this man at the front holding the ear. He thinks it's a fan, and so on. Now, the perspective of each of those characters is only based on what they are holding. If they were to open their eyes, then obviously their perspective would be entirely transformed. And this links to this exam paper because what we're trying to do is when we're reading, we're trying to think about the writer and what their perspective is. What is it that they think and feel about the topic they're writing about? What don't they know? What might it be about the time they live in or the experiences they've had that help us to understand their perspective? And when we're a writer ourselves, we're using our own experiences and viewpoints and perspectives to put forward our own opinions and arguments. So as well as the question paper, you're also going to be given what's called an insert in the exam, and inside the insert booklet are going to be the 2 sources that you'll be using for section A. So If we think 5 minutes through the question paper, you'll have 10 minutes to really be spending focused time reading these sources, because if you haven't read them properly, it's going to be very difficult to write about them with any clarity. So you really do need to practice reading and commit yourself to having that really focused time in the exam where all you're doing is reading or rereading and rereading those sources. There will be two sources. One will be modern, more recent, and one will be set over 100 years ago. So in this example, source A we can see is our modern text, because it says source A, 21st century non-fiction, and we can see that source B is our 19th century literary non-fiction text. Now, I encourage everyone to actually read the front cover of the insert. It's very tempting to just open it straight away in a rush and a panic and get stuck into the text, but it's worth just spending a few seconds reading this information on the front, because it just settles us into understanding exactly what the text is that we've been given. So source A, we can see, is a text called Have Yourself a Horrible Christmas, and we can find out that it's an extract, so it's not the whole text, it's just a little part from an entertaining children's educational book published in 2020. Now that's important, because before we've even read the text, we already know to expect something that's entertaining, and to be entertaining it's likely to have humour in it, it's meant to engage, make us laugh. It's aimed at children, and it's also educational, so we also know it's going to include facts. It's designed to teach something to children. So we haven't read it yet, but we can already start to formulate some opinions about the writer's perspective and viewpoint, what the writer's trying to do. Source B is called Christmas 1897, a true Victorian Christmas. It already sounds more serious, more sensible, and then we find out it's a teenage girl's diary entry written in 1897. So a diary entry, a very different thing to an entertaining children's educational book. This is something that's very personal, is written by a teenager and presumably written to be private, although it ended up being published because she grew up to actually be a famous character. We know that this is something that was actually originally written as a private record of an experience. Now, if you want to read these texts and have them in front of you, they are available via the Athelstan Trust website, but if you haven't got access to that at the moment, you don't want to print them off, that's fine. These videos are designed to help you without you needing to have the papers in front of you, but as I've said, they are available if you'd find it helpful to make notes or even give it a go. What you'll notice quite quickly though is that the two texts that I've chosen, they're probably not the kind of text that you would get in the exam. They're a little bit easier, shorter, and I've deliberately chosen things that are simple and straightforward, because when making the video it just means it's easier for me to help you understand the strategies rather than spending time trying to unpick a complex text when we're looking at a screen. Okay, so let's look at source A. So at the top of each source you'll get a little bit more information from the examiner, who's trying to give you as many hints and tips as possible about the text. So again, read it, think about, is there anything that helps you before you even get stuck into the text. Here we find out that source A is an extract from the children's book Have Yourself a Horrible Christmas by Terry Deary and Martin Brown, published in 2020. It's part of a series of entertaining educational books. Horrible Christmas uses humour to explore the factual history of festive traditions. So we've got a little bit more information there. We know this is part of a series, so some of you will recognise the Horrible History series. It's part of a series that children will be hooked into. They'll be very familiar with the way that it's set out. It's obviously very successful because it's been made into a series. Again, we've got those words entertaining and educational, which helps us. And it tells us very specifically it uses humour to explore the factual history of festive traditions. So it's going to be a funny look at the history of Christmas, but the information given is actually fact. Let's have a look at this extract then. It's called Curious Christmas Customs. There are hundreds of tall tales about Christmas customs, from not so jolly holly to miserable mistletoe. They're very interesting. Christmas trees. One of the stories of why we have Christmas trees says it started with the pagans in Germany who worshipped the oak tree. When Christianity arrived, they still wanted to worship a tree, so the priests suggested the pine tree. Is a triangle shape, with each point standing for the Christian Trinity of the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. For luck, you should decorate your Christmas tree with a spider in a web, Lithuania, from a legend that said a poor woman had nothing to decorate her tree with. Her children woke on Christmas morning to find it covered in glittering webs. Straw bird cages, Lithuania, maybe for the spiders when they've done their web making. Painted eggshells, Czechoslovakia, just for a yoke I guess. Popcorn, America. Streamers were made from popcorn dyed bright colours and laced on a string with nuts and berries. Very pretty. Horns and bells meant to make noise and scare away any evil spirits. Scaring away spirits is also the idea behind putting a fairy on the top. But what good is a Christmas fairy supposed to be? Does it scare away pixies? Martin Luther. There's another story about the first Christmas tree. The German preacher Martin Luther was walking through the forest one night in the 1520s and admired the stars twinkling through the branches of the fir trees. He cut down a small tree and took it home to show his family how wonderful God's universe is. Of course, the kids said, "But we can't see the stars because we're in the house, Dad." So Marvellous Martin filled the tree with candles. "Can you see them now?" he asked. "God, Dad, can we have one of these every Christmas?" they begged. And so the idea of a Christmas tree at Christmas was born, which is a bit of a cheat when you think about it. They're not stars. Fowl fact. Those old candlelit Christmas trees may look very pretty on Christmas cards, but what the Christmas cards don't give you is the smell. Most people couldn't afford fine beeswax candles, so they used tallow, which is usually made from sheep fat. So a room with a Christmas tree would stink of burning sheep fat. As source B, very different kind of text. We know already it's a diary entry extract from 1897 describing Victorian teenager Kate Fry's excitement at decorating the family Christmas for the first time. Until 1897, the family had always spent Christmas at an aunt's house. The tree is decorated with presents by the children and only revealed to the rest of the family after Christmas dinner. So the examiner gives us a little bit of information there about the fact that Kate Fry's particularly excited this year because she doesn't normally get to have Christmas in her own home, and as one of the children in the house, then she's allowed to go through the excitement of decorating the tree to reveal it to the rest of the family on Christmas Day. So here's her diary extract. Kate Fry's diary, Christmas 1897, a true Victorian Christmas. Wednesday, December the 22nd, 1897. We have bought 10 shillings worth of toys from Aunt Anne's charity bazaar for our tree, a fairy for the top, glass balls and birds, drums, trumpets and penny toys for all kinds and many more little things. Thursday, December the 23rd, 1897. Directly after lunch, Agnes and I started on the Christmas tree. It is such a beauty and touches the drawing room ceiling. We did up part of the presents, the principal ones in coloured papers. Just as we were in the midst of it, Constance and Katie, daughters of Aunt Agnes Gilby, arrived down. We just let them peep in the room, which was in a fine muddle. We allowed Mother in the room, but she didn't assist, but Daddy we couldn't allow in, much to his annoyance really. The tree looks lovely. It ought to be a huge success. I have never seen one look nicer, and it is simply crammed with things. Friday, December the 24th, 1897, Christmas Eve. It was a beautiful morning, though still most bitterly cold, ever so many degrees of frost, and we went out, the three of us, to try to get warm. The house is icy. Directly after lunch, the three of us started decorating till 4 o'clock. Pratt, the gardener, cut up the holly, and we put it and lots of mistletoe up everywhere, except Daddy's room. He is most disagreeable just now. Saturday, December the 25th, 1897, Christmas Day. We had a quiet afternoon round the fire in the morning room. Can't let anyone in the drawing room as the tree is there. I slipped off after tea to finish it all off. We have got up fair fun and excitement over it and made them all curious. We were all very merry at dinner, except Daddy, who is still seedy, although we had no turkey. Had a pair of our own fowls killed as they have not arrived. I don't like Christmas dinner without turkeys, but we had the pudding, mince pies and crackers all right. Then came the Christmas tree, which was a huge success, and we all went quite mad. So you can see that both the texts are themed in the same way. So we've got two texts that are both about Christmas trees in particular, but Christmas generally. But the text, the perspectives of the writer, the reason why they've been written, the way in which they've been written are very different. And that's what this paper is about. It's that simple. It's about then, can you unpick those differences and the similarities, thinking about the writer's perspectives. And question 1 really is a nice easy way into that. So what question 1 is going to do is to ask you, just for one of the sources, and in this paper you can see it's source A, just to look at a tiny little part of that source. So it says read again the first part of source A from lines 3 to 18. A really good tip in the exam, if you're not doing this already, is to draw a box around lines 3 to 18. Or highlight it, or put a big bracket down the side of lines 3 to 18. In the exam, the insert sources will actually have line numbers to help you do that. Because if you start to pull out ideas from lines 20 or from lines 1 or line 30, you're not going to get the marks. You've got to stay focused on what happens between line 3 and line 18. So that's really important. This is only a 5-minute question. It's worth 4 marks. You're all capable of getting 4 marks on this. This is a nice little starter where you're just retrieving facts. So what you have to do is choose 4 statements which are true. Now there are instructions that I think can sound quite complicated, but hopefully I'm going to give you a strategy that means that you won't need to know really about making errors. But what it tells you to do is to shade the circles in the boxes of the ones that you think are true. That's easy, and I'll show you what that looks like in a moment. You choose a maximum of 4 statements. Don't choose 5. Don't think, oh well, if I just colour them all in then I'm bound to get them right. It doesn't work like that. You've only to have 4 statements with your little circle shaded in. If you do make an error, you cross out the whole box, and then if you change your mind, you draw a circle around the box. But hopefully you won't need to get into that muddle, because I'm going to show you a technique to avoid it. So this is what the statements will look like. You can see that the bullet points give you letters A to H, and then on the right hand side is the circle in the box that you shade in. So if you look down those statements, only 4 of them will be true. You will need to read them slowly and carefully, because it can be quite easy to be tricked into thinking you remember something. If you don't double check it with what you've actually read, you could get yourself in a muddle here, but it should be straightforward so long as you read carefully. So we've got those statements. For example, A, Christians used to worship the oak tree. G, horns and bells on a Christmas tree are supposed to scare away evil spirits. E, in Czechoslovakia they put egg yolk over the tree. Your task is to decide which 4 are true. Now some of you will do this really quickly, and this strategy you might not need, but if you're a little bit nervous about getting it wrong, this is something that I suggest you could do to help make things easier. Now you hopefully can see now that I have crossed out A. Christians used to worship the oak tree. I know that's false, so I have put a cross through the sentence, and you can see I'm now crossing out C and E and F. Is that I'm making a decision that I think that all of those statements are false, but because I don't want to put my shading in the circle just yet, I want to check it out. If I just cross out the sentence, then it's not going to make a mess of the bit I actually have to answer on. And once I've done that, I can check the ones that I've got uncrossed and think, oh, let me just double check that B and D and G and H seem like they're true. And when I'm confident that that's the case, you can see now on the screen I shade in those 4 boxes, and what that means is you're not getting into a bit of a mess with those circles in the boxes, and you can feel really confident that you've got that 4 out of 4 at the start of the exam. So I hope that's a helpful tip for you. In the next 4 videos I'm then going to go through the other questions and give you some strategies for those, but hopefully you now feel like you've got an understanding of the overall format of the exam. Thanks for listening.